The year was 1873, and in the town of Red Rock, New Mexico, there was a rule that every man, woman, and child knew by heart. You don't ask about the woman in the black dress. Nobody talked about her. Nobody looked at her too long. And if you were smart, truly smart, you didn't think about her at all. But Cole Harlan wasn't smart. He was broken. He was hollowed out like a tree struck by lightning, still standing but barely alive on the inside. He'd ridden into Red Rock with nothing but a worn saddle, a loaded pistol, and a name he was slowly forgetting how to be proud of. He wasn't looking for love. He wasn't looking for trouble either. But somehow, in this life, the things you aren't looking for have a way of finding you first. She walked into the Silver Bell Saloon on a Tuesday evening when the wind smelled like rain and regret. And Cole Harlan looked up from his whiskey glass just long enough to see something that would cost him everything. A pair of dark eyes that somehow looked both ancient and kind. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Send me a comment down below. Wherever you are in this world, I'm sending you love and warmth tonight, because this is a story about love. But not the gentle kind. This is the kind that scars, the kind that saves, and the kind that makes a man choose between the life he built and the soul he almost lost. Settle in. This one will stay with you. Red Rock wasn't much to look at. It was the kind of town that existed on maps only because someone had to mark the space between somewhere and nowhere. 3 rows of dusty buildings. A church with a broken bell. A sheriff's office with bars on the windows but no sheriff inside. The last one had quit 2 months ago and nobody had been brave enough or foolish enough to take his place. The Silver Bell Saloon stood at the center of it all like a rotting tooth in the mouth of a dying man. The floorboards creaked. The mirror behind the bar was cracked down the middle, which meant every man who looked at his reflection saw himself split in two. Maybe that was fitting. Most of the men in Red Rock were split in two. Cole Harlan had arrived on a Thursday. He'd told the barkeep his name was Thomas. The barkeep, a round man named Gus with fingers like sausages and eyes that saw too much, hadn't believed him. But Gus was wise enough to know that out here, a man's real name was his own private business. Cole had been riding for 11 days straight. Before Red Rock, there was a town called Millhaven. Before Millhaven, there was a woman named Alice. And before Alice, well, that part of the story isn't for the beginning. He sat in the far corner of the saloon every night, back against the wall like a man who'd learned the hard way never to face away from a door. He drank slowly. He ate what Gus put in front of him without complaint. He didn't start fights, but he didn't back down from them either. He spoke maybe 20 words a day, and 10 of those were usually another glass and thank you. The men of Red Rock left him alone. Not because they feared him, though some did, because there was something in his eyes that made a man think twice before speaking carelessly, but because he gave off the particular energy of someone who had already survived whatever worst thing you could imagine doing to him. You can't threaten a man who's already been through hell and learned to walk without flinching. Cole Harlan was 34 years old and looked 45. He had a scar on his left jaw from a knife fight he didn't start. He had 3 fingers on his right hand that didn't fully close anymore, the bones broken badly and healed wrong. He had a silver pocket watch he never opened but always carried, turning it over and over in his palm like a man counting prayers he'd stopped believing in. He had, at some point in his life, been someone's hero. He remembered that the way you remember a dream, in fragments, in colors, in feelings that don't quite make sense anymore. On the 11th night, a Tuesday, the wind picked up. New Mexico wind in October is a specific kind of cruel. It doesn't howl. It whispers. It slips through every crack in every wall and finds the coldest part of you and settles there, quiet and patient, like it's got all the time in the world to make you miserable. Cole was turning his silver watch over in his palm when the door to the Silver Bell opened. He didn't look up right away. He never did. He'd learned that whatever comes through a door will eventually make itself known. You don't need to rush toward anything in this life. But then Gus made a sound. Not a word. Not even a gasp. Just a small, sharp intake of breath. Like a man who's just seen a ghost he'd convinced himself he'd imagined. And Cole looked up. She stood in the doorway for just a moment. 1 breath, 2. and the wind moved around her like it was giving her space. She wore a black dress, fitted at the waist, with a faded blue shawl around her shoulders. Dark hair pinned up beneath a small hat. Dark eyes that swept the room without hurry, without fear, without that particular helplessness that most women in saloon doorways tried so hard to hide. She wasn't helpless. That was the first thing Cole noticed. The second thing he noticed was that every man in the room had gone very still. Not the stillness of desire, though there was some of that too, but the stillness of something older. Something closer to reverence. Or warning. She walked to the bar. She spoke quietly to Gus. Gus nodded, disappeared into the back, and came out with a small wrapped parcel that she tucked beneath her arm. She paid him in coin, said something that made Gus smile just slightly. A rarity, like sun through November clouds, and then she turned to leave. She passed Cole's table. She didn't look at him, but she paused, just for a half second. One beat where her feet stopped moving and her chin tilted just barely, the way a person does when they hear something far away that they can't quite identify. Then she continued walking, and the door swung shut behind her, and the wind dropped immediately, like it had followed her out. The saloon exhaled. Someone coughed. Cards were picked back up. Glass clinked against glass. Cole looked at Gus. Gus was already looking at him with an expression Cole couldn't fully read. Something between pity and a very specific kind of worry. "Don't," Gus said. Just that one word. Cole looked back at his glass. At the amber surface of his whiskey. Perfectly still, perfectly dark. "I wasn't going to do anything," Cole said. Gus shook his head slowly and went back to wiping the bar. "Nobody ever thinks they are," he said. "Right up until they do." Cole turned the silver watch over in his palm. Once, twice, 3 times. Outside, the wind had started again. And somewhere in the October dark of Red Rock, New Mexico, a woman in a black dress was walking home with a parcel under her arm and secrets so heavy they'd bent lesser people in half. Cole Harlan told himself he wouldn't think about her again. He was already thinking about her. Morning came to Red Rock the way it always did, without apology. The sun came hard and flat over the eastern ridge, turning everything gold and copper, and then, within the hour, the particular pale, merciless white of a desert day. The town woke slowly. Dogs stretched in doorways. The blacksmith's hammer started its rhythm. Children appeared from somewhere and disappeared just as quickly, chasing something invisible through the alleys between buildings. Cole sat on the steps of the boarding house where he rented a room and drank black coffee from a tin cup and watched the town shake itself awake. He was thinking about the woman in the black dress. He hadn't slept much. When he had, the dreams had been the usual kind. Smoke and shouting and a face he couldn't see clearly no matter how hard he tried in the dream. He'd woken up in the gray hour before dawn with his heart beating too fast and the silver watch in his hand even though he didn't remember picking it up. He found Gus at the saloon just after 9, stacking chairs off tables and sweeping sawdust out the front door with the slow, methodical patience of a man who'd been doing the same thing every morning for 20 years. "The woman from last night," Cole said. Gus kept sweeping. "What's her name?" "Didn't ask," Gus said. "Gus." The big man stopped sweeping, leaned on the broom handle, looked at Cole with those eyes that had seen too much and learned to carry it quietly. "Her name is May Calloway," he said finally. "She lives out past the old Dunmore property, about 2 miles east. Little house by itself. Been there going on 8 months now. Came from somewhere west, nobody knows exactly where. Nobody asked exactly why." "What does she do?" Cole asked. Gus was quiet for a moment. "She heals people," he said. Cole waited. "Not a doctor," Gus continued, reading the question in Cole's expression. "Not exactly. She knows plants, herbs, old methods. When the Henderson boy broke his arm and it started to poison his blood, Doc Fenner had given up on him entirely. She came in, spent 3 days in that boy's room with things she'd grown herself, and the boy walked out of there a week later." Cole turned his coffee cup in his hands. "That's why men look at her like she's a ghost." "Men look at her like that," Gus said carefully, "because 2 of the men she helped went and fell in love with her. Both of them ended up leaving town. different directions, different times, but the same look on their faces when they rode out. He paused. Like something had broken in them that couldn't be fixed this side of the mountains. Cole looked out at the street. A wagon rolled past, trailing dust. You think she did that to them? On purpose. Gus shook his head. I think she heals bodies, he said. And I think sometimes when she does that, she accidentally makes a man feel things he's been keeping locked up very tight for a very long time. And when those things come flooding out, he shrugged. Some men can handle that. Some can't. Cole stood up. Which kind do you think I am? Gus picked his broom back up. I think you're the most dangerous kind, he said. The kind who doesn't know yet. Cole walked back out into the morning. He told himself he was going to take a ride. Clear his head. Maybe head north along the ridge and see what the country looked like from up there. He'd been in Red Rock long enough. Maybe it was time to move on. He was good at moving on. It was, in fact, the one skill he'd refined to something close to an art. He saddled his horse. A gray mare he called Nothing, because names made things harder to leave behind, and he rode east. He told himself this happened by accident. Didn't. The Dunmore property was easy to find. The old house had been abandoned for years and had the particular sadness of structures that had once held families and now held only weather. But past it, just where a line of cottonwood trees bent toward a thin creek, there was a small house that stood differently than everything else around it. It stood with a kind of quiet intention, like it had been placed exactly where it was for a reason. The front garden was unlike anything Cole had seen in the desert. Organized rows of plants in shades of green so varied they seemed impossible. Bundles of dried herbs hanging from the porch beams. A wooden chair on the porch where a cat slept without concern. May Calloway was kneeling in the garden. She heard the horse. She didn't startle. She simply turned and looked at Cole with those dark eyes, calm and direct, and waited to see what he would do. Cole didn't know what he would do. He pulled the mare up at the fence line. I'm sorry, he said. I was riding and I didn't mean to come this far. People rarely mean to end up where they are, she said. Her voice was low and even. That doesn't make where they are any less real. Cole opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I saw you last night, he said. At the Silver Bell. I know, she said. She looked at him with a measuring kind of attention, not unkind but precise, like a person assessing something they haven't decided about yet. You're the man who tells Gus his name is Thomas. Something moved in Cole's chest, something he didn't quite have a word for. Cole, he said. My name is Cole. She nodded once, as though she'd suspected something exactly like that. Would you like some water? She asked. You look like a man who's been riding on empty for a long time. And Cole Harlan, who had ridden away from every good thing that had ever tried to keep him, dismounted his horse. He didn't know yet what that single decision would cost him. He didn't know yet what it would save. He came back the next day. He told himself it was because the water she'd given him had been cold and clean, drawn from a good well, and the coffee at Gus's place tasted like something scraped from the bottom of regret. He told himself it was the quiet out here, away from the scrape and shuffle of town. He told himself a lot of things. May didn't seem surprised to see him. She was on the porch with a clay bowl full of something she was grinding with a stone pestle, and she simply looked up when he came through the gate and said, The gray mare's left front shoe is wearing uneven. She'll be lame in another week if you don't get it seen to. Cole looked down at his horse, then at May. How do you know that? The way she was walking yesterday, she said. She favors it just slightly on hard ground. He'd ridden this horse for 2 years. He hadn't noticed. He tied the mare at the fence and came and sat on the porch steps without being asked. May kept grinding. The sound of it was rhythmic and oddly calming. The cat from the day before appeared from nowhere and sat beside Cole with the regal disinterest that only cats can manage. What is that? Cole asked, nodding at the bowl. Yarrow root and willow bark, she said. Dried and mixed right. It pulls fever down and keeps infection from spreading. I have 3 dried bundles left and I won't be able to harvest more until spring. So I'm being careful with what I have. Who's sick? Widow Pierce, on the north end of town. She won't see Doc Fenner because she owes him money and feels the shame of it too strongly to ask for help. So I take it to her. Cole was quiet for a moment. She know you don't want payment? May gave him a brief sideways look. She brings me eggs when she has them. It's not about wanting payment. It's about letting her keep her dignity. Something settled in Cole's chest. He recognized that instinct, that particular care for the pride of suffering people, because someone had once shown it to him. A long time ago, in a different life. He looked out at the garden. Where did you learn all of this? She kept grinding. My grandmother, she said. She was from the high country. She knew every plant that grows in desert soil. She knew which ones heal and which ones harm and which ones do both depending on the hand that uses them. A pause. She always said that knowledge itself is neutral. It's intention that makes it medicine or poison. Cole turned the silver watch over in his pocket. He'd started to do that without realizing it. What happened to her? He asked. Your grandmother. May's hands paused for just a half second. Then she kept grinding. She died the way strong women often do, she said. Taking care of everyone else when there was no one left to take care of her. The afternoon light was long and gold over the cottonwoods. A hawk made a slow circle in the pale blue sky. Cole said, Can I ask you something? You can ask, she said. Why Red Rock? There's nothing here. She stopped grinding then, set the pestle down, looked at him directly in that way she had. Not harsh, not soft, just fully present. Like she'd given him her complete attention as both a gift and a warning. There's a creek, she said, and good soil, and people who hurt in ways nobody's tried to address. She paused. What brought you here? Nothing, Cole said. I was just moving. Moving away from something, or toward something. He was quiet for a long beat. The hawk was gone now. The sky was empty and wide. Away, he said finally. She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer too. Most people who come to Red Rock are moving away from something, she said. That's what makes it a town like this. It's built from whatever people couldn't carry anymore. Cole looked at his hands, at the 3 fingers that wouldn't close right. I had a family, he said. He didn't know why he said it. The words came out like something had loosened inside him without his permission. Wife. A boy. 4 years old. May was very still. There was a fire, Cole said. His voice was flat and careful, the way a man speaks when he's decided he won't let the words feel too much. I wasn't home. I was 3 counties away chasing work that didn't pay enough to matter. And I wasn't home. The silence stretched like the desert itself, wide and deep and holding everything. I've been moving since, he said. It's been 2 years. He looked up. May was watching him with an expression he hadn't seen on a person's face in a long time. Not pity. Not the particular horrified sympathy that made men who'd lost things feel like animals in a cage to be observed. It was something quieter than that. Something more honest. It looked like recognition. 2 years, she said softly. And you haven't stopped. Stopping feels like agreeing that it happened, he said. She nodded once. She didn't say I'm sorry, which he was grateful for, because he'd heard those words so many times they'd worn smooth and meaningless, like river stones rubbed to nothing. She just reached over and picked the pestle back up. The yarrow, she said after a moment, is ready. I need to get it to Widow Pierce before dark. I'll ride with you, Cole said. She looked at him. You don't have to. I know, he said. She considered him for a long, serious moment. Then she stood up and she went inside to get her shawl, and Cole untied the gray mare, and they rode into town together as the sun began to sink behind the western ridge like a coal going cold. Neither of them said much, but something had shifted between them that couldn't be unshifted. Something that felt, in Cole's chest, uncomfortably close to warmth. The trouble had a name. It always does. His name was Decker Voss, and he rode into Red Rock on a Friday morning with 2 men behind him and the particular posture of a person who had never once in his life been told to stop. He was lean and sunburned with pale eyes the color of shallow water and a smile that moved his mouth without reaching those eyes at all. Cole was at the blacksmith's getting the gray mare's shoe seen to when they rode in. He didn't recognize Voss at first. It had been 3 years since he'd seen him, and 3 years in this life can change a man's face considerably. But then Voss turned his head and looked down the street with that same slow, sweeping survey he'd always done. Counting people, counting exits, calculating, always calculating, and Cole felt the recognition like a bucket of cold water. He turned his back. Voss had been one of the men riding with the Callahan outfit years ago, before Cole's family, before everything. Cole had done work back then that he wasn't proud of. Work that lived in the dark back room of his memory behind a door he kept firmly shut. Voss had been part of that time. They weren't friends. They weren't enemies. They were something worse. They were men who knew each other's capabilities. Men who knew what the other one was actually willing to do. Cole paid the blacksmith and rode out to May's house that afternoon. She was in the garden. She took one look at his face when he came through the gate and she set down what she was holding. "Something happened," she said. "Someone from my past rode in this morning," he said. He tied the mare and came onto the porch and sat down heavily. "I need to leave, May." He'd started calling her May somewhere in the 3rd week. He hadn't marked exactly when it happened. She sat in her wooden chair and looked at him with that clear, steady gaze. "Is this man dangerous? To me, maybe. To the town, possibly. To you." He stopped. The thought landed somewhere he hadn't fully prepared for. "Yes. If he knew you meant something to me, yes." The word meant hung in the air between them like something physical. May didn't look away. "How long have you been running from the things you used to be?" she asked. "Long enough that I'm tired," he said honestly. "Then maybe," she said, "it's time to stop running." He stood up, paced the length of the porch. "You don't understand. Voss isn't the kind of problem you face down and resolve. He's the kind of problem that multiplies. He'll have friends. He'll have reasons. He's come looking for something, and that means he won't leave until he gets it or someone puts him in the ground." "What does he want?" Cole stopped pacing. He stared out at the desert, at the long, pale expanse of it, and he said the thing he hadn't let himself say aloud since he'd been in Red Rock. "Before my family died, before the fire, I had been gathering money to take us away. North. I'd been keeping it in a lockbox. I'd gotten it doing work I'm not." He paused. Breathed. "Voss thinks I still have it. He always thought I was holding out on the outfit. He was right. I took what I'd earned and I kept it, and I intended to disappear with my family, and he knew it." May was quiet. "Do you still have it?" she asked. He looked at her. "I did have it," he said, "for about 6 months after the fire. And then I gave every dollar of it to a church in Millhaven. Because I didn't know what else to do with money I'd earned wrong for a life I no longer had." May stood up from her chair and walked to the porch railing and looked out at the desert the same way he was. They stood side by side, not touching, and the afternoon was very still. "Does he know that?" she asked. "No," Cole said. "Nobody knows that." She nodded slowly. "Then he'll stay until he takes it from you or until he decides you've truly got nothing." She paused. "Which means staying or leaving look about the same from where you're standing." Cole turned to look at her. "How are you so calm about this?" She didn't answer right away. She turned slightly and looked at him in that direct, measuring way, and this time what he saw in her expression was something he hadn't expected to find there. Not fear, not calm even. It was grief. The quiet, controlled grief of someone who had already lost a great deal and had built their composure directly on top of it. "Because I've been afraid before," she said. "And I've learned that being afraid quietly is more useful than being afraid loudly." Cole looked at her for a long moment, at her dark eyes and the fine lines at their corners and the set of her mouth that was both soft and absolutely unmovable. Something in him was pulling in 2 directions with a force that was almost physical. The part that ran. The part that wanted desperately, terrifyingly to stay. He reached up and touched her face. Just once. His knuckle against her cheek, barely there. She didn't move away. She didn't move toward him either. She simply let him do it, and looked at him with those eyes that seemed to understand every broken thing he was made of. "You're going to break a lot of hearts," he said quietly. He didn't know why. It came out of somewhere deep in him, some recognition he hadn't put words to yet. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, softly, almost a whisper, "I only wanted to mend yours." Cole stood there. The desert wind moved through the cottonwoods. And somewhere in Red Rock, Decker Voss was sitting in the Silver Bell Saloon asking Gus questions that Gus was carefully not answering. Time, which had felt still for a few beautiful weeks, had started moving again. Gus came out to the house that evening. Cole heard the horse before he saw him, and he was already standing at the door with his hand near his holster when Gus's round silhouette came through the gate on a brown mule he kept for errands. Cole relaxed, just slightly. Gus dismounted with the careful effort of a large man on a small animal and came to the porch without preamble. "He asked about you," Gus said. "What did you tell him?" "That I didn't know anyone named Cole Harlan. That the only man who might fit his description was a fellow called Thomas who'd moved on." Gus looked at Cole steadily. "He didn't believe me, but he was polite about not believing me, which is worse." "Did he threaten you?" "Not in words," Gus said. "Men like that don't need words." May appeared in the doorway behind Cole, and Gus looked at her with an expression Cole couldn't fully read. Something between deep respect and an old worry. "Miss May," Gus said, nodding. "Gus," she said, "come inside. I'll put something warm on." Gus shook his head. "No time for that. I need to say what I came to say and then get back before he notices I'm gone." He looked at both of them. "He's got 2 men with him. Both of them are the kind you don't negotiate with. He's going to stay in town until he finds what he came for, and he's going to make things difficult for anyone who looks like they might be helping the man he's looking for." Cole felt the weight of that land in the room. "He'll come here," Cole said. "Eventually," Gus agreed. "Someone will tell him. Not to be cruel. Just because people talk when they're scared, and he's already making people scared." Cole looked at May. She was leaning in the doorway with her arms folded across her chest, perfectly still, and he could see her thinking, processing, calculating the same steady internal work she did with her plants and her remedies, taking the problem apart to see what it was made of. "She needs to go somewhere safe," Cole said to Gus. "I'm right here," May said. "I know," Cole said. "May, I'm not leaving my house," she said. Not angry, not afraid, just absolute. Cole pressed his jaw tight. He looked at Gus. Gus shrugged helplessly, the shrug of a man who recognized unmovable when he saw it. "Then I stay here tonight," Cole said. May looked at him. She didn't argue. After Gus left, the night settled in around the little house like dark water rising. Cole sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees while May moved around inside. He could hear her, the soft sounds of someone going about the ordinary business of an evening. A cup being set down, a drawer being opened, the creak of a chair. Those sounds did something to him. They reached into his chest and touched something that had been untouchable for 2 years. The sound of a house with someone alive in it. Around midnight, she brought him coffee and sat beside him on the porch steps. The stars over the New Mexico desert were extraordinary. The kind of stars you can only see when you're far from everything, when the dark is truly dark and there's nothing between you and the sky. They sat in silence beneath them for a while. "Tell me about your son," she said. The words were gentle. Not a trap. Not curiosity for its own sake. The words of someone who understood that the dead deserve to be spoken about. Cole was quiet for a long time. "Daniel," he said finally. His name was Daniel. He stopped, swallowed, started again. He had his mother's eyes, this shade of green that doesn't exist in nature anywhere else I've ever looked. He was afraid of horses at first, which... A sound escaped Cole that was almost a laugh, brief and painful, which was awkward given the life. But I was patient with him. We worked on it together, him and me, every morning. And by the time he was 3.5, he could feed a horse from his hand without flinching. May was listening, not talking, not filling the silence, just listening the way she did everything, completely. "I was going to take them somewhere good," Cole said. "I had a plan. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was a plan. He looked up at the stars. I just needed one more month. One more month and I would have been home and we would have gone. He stopped talking. May reached over and put her hand over his, the one with the 3 fingers that wouldn't close right. She didn't speak. She just held his hand in the dark on the porch steps under the impossible stars. You couldn't have known, she said finally. No, he agreed. But I knew I was the kind of man who wasn't there. Silence. You're here now, she said. Simple. Direct. Not forgiving or excusing, just naming what was true. He turned and looked at her. This woman who had come to a dying town and planted things in desert soil, and kept a dignified old widow's pride intact and sat beside a broken man in the middle of the night without asking for anything in return. Who takes care of you, May? He asked. She looked at him for a long moment. Something moved through her expression, something she usually kept very carefully covered. Nobody, she said. Not in a long time. Cole held her hand tighter. They sat that way until the sky began to pale in the east, and the desert came back in grays and blues, and somewhere down the road toward Red Rock, a rooster announced the morning to no one in particular. And then, just as dawn was fully breaking, they heard hoofbeats. 3 sets, coming fast down the road from town. Cole was on his feet before the sound fully registered. He put his hand on May's shoulder. Inside, he said. Back of the house. There's a cellar door on the east side. Go in, lock it from inside. Don't come out until everything is quiet. You understand. She looked at him. May. I understand, she said. She went inside. Cole stepped off the porch and stood in the morning light of the garden with his rifle in both hands and waited. Decker Voss came through the gate on his black horse like a man who'd never once in his life been refused entry to anything. His 2 men flanked behind him. They spread slightly as they entered, the practiced spread of men who'd done this before, who understood angles and lines of fire the way other men understood card games. Cole's hands were steady. He was surprised to find that they were steady. Cole Harlan, Voss said. He said it the way you say a thing you've rehearsed. With satisfaction, like setting down a heavy bag you've been carrying across a long distance. My God, you've gotten old. We both have, Cole said. Voss dismounted. His 2 men stayed on their horses, hands loose near their belts. Voss walked forward slowly, looking at Cole with those pale, shallow water eyes and that disconnected smile. This is a strange place you've landed, Voss said, looking at the garden, at the bundles of herbs on the porch at the small house. Not what I expected for a man sitting on what you've got. I don't have it anymore, Cole said. Voss stopped, tilted his head. That's so. Every dollar, Cole said. Mill Haven. Church on the East Road. Ask anyone. Something shifted in Voss's expression. Not rage, not disbelief. Something more complicated and more dangerous than either. You gave it away, he said flatly. I gave it away, Cole confirmed. The silence stretched between them, thin and tight as a wire. That, Voss said slowly, is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And Cole, I've heard some spectacular stupidity in my life. I know, Cole said. It wasn't a smart decision. It was the only decision I had. Voss studied him. Cole had known this man for years, had ridden beside him in the dark of a dozen worse situations than this, and he knew how to read him. He watched Voss process the information, the particular way his jaw worked when he was recalculating, when the plan he'd carried for miles was disintegrating in his hands. So you've got nothing, Voss said. I've got nothing that belongs to you, Cole said. Everything you earned riding with the outfit belongs to the outfit, Voss said, his voice going flat and sharp as a blade. That was the agreement. I broke the agreement, Cole said. And I've been living with the consequences of that for 3 years. So have you, apparently, since it took you this long to find me. Something ignited behind Voss's pale eyes. The smile was entirely gone now. You think this ends with a conversation? Voss said. I think, Cole said, that you came here for money that doesn't exist, which means you've got a choice. You walk away and that's the end of it. Or you push it further, in which case one of us won't ride out of this garden. One of Voss's men moved his horse sideways. Cole tracked the movement without turning his head fully, watching it in his peripheral vision with the well-trained awareness of a man who'd spent years knowing exactly where every threat in a room was standing. "There's 3 of us," Voss said. "There's 1 of me," Cole agreed. "And I've got nothing left to lose. You've still got 2 good men and whatever comes next in your life. That's an asymmetry worth thinking about." Voss stared at him. Cole stared back. The morning was absolutely still. No wind, no sound. Just the desert light coming harder and brighter by the minute, making everything sharp and clear and irreversible. And then, from the porch of the house behind Cole, there was the unmistakable sound of a shotgun being cocked. He didn't turn around. He already knew. Voss's eyes moved to the porch, and something in them changed. Something that looked almost like honest surprise. "You didn't go to the cellar," Cole said, without turning. "No," May said clearly from behind him. "I didn't." There was a silence that held everything in it. Voss looked at his 2 men. Something passed between them, wordless, the communication of men who've survived by recognizing when a situation has changed shape on them. Then Voss looked back at Cole. "You always were the strangest one of us," he said. "I know," Cole said. "Another beat, too." Voss turned and walked back to his horse. He mounted without hurry. He looked at Cole one more time from the saddle, long, flat, measuring, and then he turned the horse and rode back through the gate. His 2 men followed. Cole stood in the garden and listened to the hoofbeats until they were completely gone, until there was nothing but the sound of his own heart and the sound of the desert waking up around him. He turned around. May stood on the porch with the shotgun lowered, watching him. She wasn't shaking. Her chin was level. Her eyes were clear. He walked up the porch steps and stopped in front of her. "I told you to go to the cellar," he said. "I know," she said. "You could have been killed." "So could you," she said. He looked at her for a very long time. Then he took the shotgun gently from her hands and set it against the porch railing, and he stood before her in the morning light of October in Red Rock, New Mexico, with the cottonwoods moving quietly behind her and the garden full of things she'd grown from nothing in desert soil. "I don't know how to stay," he said. "I've forgotten." She reached up and touched his face, the scar along his jaw, her fingers gentle and certain. "I know," she said. "But you're still here." Cole Harlan stayed in Red Rock. He didn't make a big decision about it. He didn't announce it or plant a flag or draw a line in the dust and declare himself on one side of it. He just didn't leave. One day became a week, and 1 week became a month, and somewhere in that quiet accumulation of days, staying had simply become the shape of his life. He learned the names of all the plants in May's garden. He wasn't good with them, not the way she was, but she was patient, and he was, for the first time in years, willing to be taught. He got the gray mare's shoe fixed and started caring about the animal by name. He called her Gray. It wasn't creative. May teased him about it, just slightly, and the sound of her laughing became the thing he measured his days by. He never opened the silver pocket watch. Not for a long time. But one evening in December, when the cold had come down from the mountains and the little house was warm with firelight and the smell of herbs drying and something cooking on the stove, May found him on the porch with the watch in his hand. She sat beside him without speaking. He turned it over twice, 3 times, and then he opened it. Inside, pressed flat against the clock face, was a small drawing. A child's drawing, done in pencil, rough and simple and unmistakable. A horse. A man on a horse. And beside the man, a tiny smiling figure with enormous green eyes. Cole held it for a long time. May said nothing. She put her head gently against his shoulder and the fire crackled inside and the December stars came out over New Mexico one by one like something being lit from a great distance. Daniel had drawn it, and Cole had been carrying it next to his heart for 2 years without being able to look at it. He looked at it now, and he didn't fall apart. Maybe because something had been mended slowly and carefully, the way only real things get mended, not by force but by time and soil, and someone patient enough to tend to what everyone else had written off as beyond saving. Some people ride into your life, and some people simply wait there, growing things in desert ground until you finally find your way home. What would you have done in Cole's place? Would you have stayed, or would you have kept riding? Drop your answer in the comments. And if the story moved something in you tonight, share it with someone who needs to hear it. I'll see you at the next one.